Hello and welcome. Wherever you are in the world, we are so glad that you joined us. I'm Christine Barnhart, your host for Supply Chain Unfiltered. This is where we provide a candid look at the challenges that supply chain professionals face and bring in forward thinkers and innovators to share their insights on the strategies, technologies, and collaborative efforts shaping the future of supply chain. Please take a moment before we get started. Let us know where you're located today by posting in the chat. So me, you may recognize the background. I am at home today. I just got back from a big Association of Supply Chain Management board meeting in Arizona, where I actually took my middle son and his then girlfriend, now fiance, because they got engaged while we were in Arizona. Very, very exciting. Um, it was absolutely beautiful, and I am so excited to have my first in-law. You guys will have to share tips and tricks and ideas with me in the coming months, as I am totally a girl mom, like newbie here. But beyond that, I'm really happy to be home to celebrate the holiday with family and friends. And speaking of friends and great work peers, my really very good personal friend, Eric Wilson, is our guest today. Welcome, Eric. We are so excited to have you this morning.
I'm excited to be on this and be able to, chat with you again and catch up on what's going on. So I'm excited about this.
Yes. So, Eric, you are, among other things, the voice of sales and operations planning and a director for the Institute of Business Forecasting. I want you to describe for the audience kind of who you are and what you do, and then we'll kind of dive into how we know each other because we have multiple connection points.
We do. So thank you very much. I am Eric Wilson. I'm the director of thought leadership for the Institute of Business Forecasting. I actually came to this role after a few decades of practitioner experience. I said I have scars to prove it if anybody wants to see it. I've been in practitioner roles, doing supply chain transformation, building up internal organizations in supply chain demand planning, specifically a lot in S&OP, IBP, and those type of processes then as well. Uh, about 4 years ago, I came IBF, and now I said the thought leader for them. It's a fancy way of saying that liaison between what's going on in the field, listening to organizations, working with organizations, and be able to share that with other organizations, either through my writings. I got a couple books, Predictive Analytics for Business Forecasting, and then most recently, as you mentioned, the voice of S&OP. We curated a book. It came out in June, The Practical Guide for Sales and Operations Planning. S&OP IBP, which is pretty much the handbook in today's, where we are today for S&OP and IBP. And it was a great exercise to put it together with a lot of other people contributing to it. So I'm really proud of what we put together for that.
And are you in Richmond, Lexington? Wait a minute.
I am in Richmond,
Rich-
Kentucky. So welcome from Kentucky, the home of Kentucky Fried Chicken and bourbon. You are
I
welcome.
I love it. I love
You're
it.
welcome.
And I know Rob is with us today from Tennessee. I'm in Indiana. So, we
We got this
definitely
part
have
covered. Yeah,
we got the Midwest covered today.
this covered today.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So it's interesting. I didn't realize you had been at IBF for 4 years. So
Yeah.
you were really kind of going, you followed me a little bit out of manufacturing. So I guess I left about a year before you did,
Yes.
moved from the scars of manufacturing and into technology. And then you moved into kind of I would say the other leg of the stool, which is more like industry leadership and things of that nature. So
Yeah, IBF, it's a professional organization built by practitioners for practitioners. So it's a professional organization about fostering the growth of demand planning, S&OP, IBP related fields. So it's really built for them, and I'm passionate about it because I get to share ideas, but then hear what people are doing then as well. So it's a great fit
when
for me.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think I discovered IDF when we worked together when we were at what was then Berry Plastics.
Yeah,
Now, and then it became very global, and now it just got purchased by Amcor. Does that sound about right? Like maybe
that's
the best of the best conference
that is right.
in Chicago?
Yeah, I've been around. I've been working with them for 15, 16 years. But yeah, during our stint there at Berry Global or Berry Plastics at the time, is I brought a lot of IBF research, a lot of their body of knowledge to that organization as well.
Yes. So full disclosure for everybody on the podcast, Eric and I probably 2015, maybe 2016 is when we met. Both of us at Barry, and at the time they were doing really a ton of work to mature and improve their supply chain. A lot of new business processes, standing up S&OP, putting in planning tools. Like it was, from my perspective, is this super, super fun time. Maybe it didn't last as long as we would have wanted it to do, but like when I look at where they were when we started and kind of where they were when we left, both of us, like, 3-4 years later, I think they came pretty far.
There was a lot of incremental changes. That I said not everything we wanted, but you from the strategy side, I mean, did amazing things from the strategy and really building out the transformational project that they're working on. They brought me in from a demand planning and S&OP side to really help build out those capabilities and working, kind of with you, but
Yep.
under your
Yeah, because I
guidance
had
there as
supply
well.
planning.
Yeah. So
Eric and I were like, but we
yes.
weren't adversarial. I promise.
No.
We cooperated on demand and supply planning.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly. I said we accomplished a lot.
Yeah,
There's so much more that could have occurred, would have, could have, but we went
yeah,
on to better opportunities since then.
absolutely. So, I mean, it kind of brings us around to like my first question for you, which is, what do you think the biggest challenges facing companies are when they think about bridging planning and execution? Because for me that was one of the big things that I saw. Before I went to Barry, I was at Mead Johnson and I was running, planning, master planning, global planning. But we were pretty siloed, right? Like I did planning and then I threw the master plan kind of over the wall and I gave it to the factories. I saw that same thing at Barry. So I want you to talk about not just what's happening in the planning space, but how do we bridge this gap between planning and execution?
There's there's multiple kind of problems or pitfalls that companies fall into to have the difficulty bridging that strategy to the operation or even the management of the organization. I mean, it goes from number one, culture. I mean, there is that aspect of it. If the company is siloed, if they don't have a collaborative type of mentality there, they're not really built to really try to bridge those gaps. You're going to struggle. But beyond there's even other things you can do to help start to bridge those gaps, or if you have the right culture, that still end up being problematic for you. One major one is just that visibility. You having the operations really operating at a different level, different visibility in their independent siloed within what's happening inside their own virtual four walls, and then you have more of the business that's operating at a different scope, different perspective, operating at a different visibility, but they even still don't have the full visibility of what's going on. So visibility is one of the key aspects I see it really problematic for companies that are capable of taking that strategy and turning it into execution and the other direction as well.
Yeah, yeah. Having the execution inform the strategy, make adjustments to the strategy. Yeah. So it's funny. I love like the Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Hmm.
Because I'm like, oh my God, I've lived that so many times. You would think I would learn, right?
Yes.
Um, but I mean, it's kind of true, right? Like all companies plan.
Hmm.
Now, how good that plan is, how robust that plan is, what, in your opinion, what kind of interaction really, like, fundamentally needs to exist between planning and execution so that these volatile market conditions and disruptions don't feel like a punch in the mouth like every single day or a couple of times a day.
Exactly. Well, part of it's your planning. hierarchy or your planning horizon. Planning it should be done well at extended planning horizons, outside of my normal constraints, outside where I can make business decisions.
Right.
So if you're operating at the right planning horizon for S&OP, extended planning horizons, then you can make where the buffers come from. You have buffers in inventory, capacity, you have trade-offs you can make. You have playbooks, supply chain playbooks. All those should come from a extended planning horizon, from that planning hierarchy at what you're dealing with, where you can make true business decisions. If done well, and that's not done in a silo, those are then pushed down with meaning of why we have the buffers, how we, different trade-offs, different playbooks. Those are pushed down from a management hierarchy, which is more of the slushy zone for organizations, where you're making trade-offs inside of organizations.
Right.
You're not making new business decisions, but you're making management decisions on trade-offs. I can do this or that. That's when you're operating in those buffers. That's when you're operating those playbooks. But as you said, you get punched in the mouth quite a few times. Reality occurs, and you have to adjust to the new realities. When you get outside of your buffers, or the playbooks are no longer working, that's when you have to make real time business decisions with the information you have. And the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. Then that's when you're making management decisions. That's your S&OE, or master planning, for a lot of organizations.
Yep.
Now, it has to work both ways. If every week I have an exception, it's no longer an
It's
exception.
not it. Yeah. That's your business.
Yeah, I need to be able to push that back up to the planning, so we can plan for that in the
Right.
future. That's where you really need that. It's almost the PDCA type cycle: plan, do, check, adjust. I plan, I'm now doing, I'm finding, I'm checking. As I make adjustments, I now push those back, and in the S&OP, I now adjust for those in the future, so they're no longer the exceptions. That's
Which
really when we need to see them working together.
Right, which is why you kind of kicked off with visibility. So
Exactly.
it's interesting. I think that lack of visibility is what drew me into technology, right? So I'd been a master planner when I was at Mead Johnson, and then I, put in supply planning for Barry, and what I just saw repetitively was we would put in tools and business processes, and we would understand internally what our buffers were, but inevitably something was happening in the extended supply chain, whether it was raw materials, ingredients, packaging, or contract manufacturers or co-packers. Things were happening outside of our four walls, and we didn't know about it until, quite frankly, there were only a few actions that we could take, right? If we would have had even a day, 2 days, a week more visibility, then that opens up other levers, right? But the closer it is to when I need it, the less flexibility I have. Is that fair?
That is quite fair. And you hit on it. I said, when you're in that slushy or management zone where you're managing the trade-offs, I mentioned the more visibility you have, the better you can manage that. Everyone wants to be agile. That it became the buzzword for the past few years, is agility. And what I've seen working with multiple companies, the agility is not necessarily on the demand side. You can get a signal, you can translate that signal. We're seeing capabilities of doing that. Where I see the problem is supply can't match that agility, because forecast is one piece of the equation. Supply is an optimization problem, where I need lots of pieces to bring in to do
Right.
true optimization. And if I'm doing trade-offs in almost real time in that management hierarchy, then I need more visibility to more things. And
Right.
real-time visibility is what you need. And that's the biggest problem. It's not the demand getting the signal. It's supply matching that cadence and having
Right.
that ability to adjust, react, have more visibility to what is going on to make better decisions. That is really where I see the problematic in most companies.
Right. And we may have to come back to this in a future podcast because it sparks the thought for me. Like, one of the things that drives me crazy is, for years we've talked about demand, 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 demand variability, but we continue to ignore supply variability. Because you're right, like it's a matching exercise, but we assume that we can always match supply to demand, and that the calculation, whatever we calculate, is 100% spot on, and there's no variability in that supply. And I'm always like, excuse me, like, there's variability in everything, right? So we will make a note, and like maybe sometime in 25, we'll have a follow-up podcast to talk about like supply variability in conjunction with demand. So, but I want to dive just a little bit deeper. What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you're seeing companies make when they attempt to do this planning and execution synchronization, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. Is we're talking about matching supply and demand. We want these things to be synchronized. What are the pitfalls?
Okay, well, that's easy because I actually have a whole chapter in my book, Practical Guide for Sales and Operation Planning. So definitely, I have a list for this one.
We should have made a slide.
Should have made a slide. There we go. When you're looking at some of the biggest problems, is number one, the vision, the overall vision strategy. If you have to have that connected, and the whole organization has to be operated. I've seen too many organizations where there's a disconnect, where you have a business model and planning that operates in an ivory tower, and then the strategy is not trickled down, or the vision is not trickled down to the people who are doing the work, and they're operating in a different direction. So you have to have the vision there. You also are going to need to have cross-functional collaboration, which is breaking down those silos. So you need to bring in multiple voices, and people have to have a seat at the table, because that needs to be able then to trickle down to the individual functions and how things work, and also have that voice at the table of when things are occurring come back up. So you have to have true cross-functional collaboration, which is not just sales and demand. It's multiple parts of the organization that needs to have a seat at the table.
And not just cross-functional within your four walls, but really cross business, right? So,
Correct.
if I haven't aligned my broader supply base, I'm making decisions and trade-offs that I may not have the materials, or my trading partners may not be able to fulfill.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing you need is the right KPIs. We always talk about balanced KPIs, and absolutely, we need to balance cash, cost, service, revenue. We need to have a balanced type of scorecards that we need to be able to look at every hierarchy, but we also need cascading KPIs. I need to know my personal and functional KPIs, how they connect to the business. If I'm doing, let's say, forecasting, and I have forecast uncertainty or error, how does that relate to inventory and cash? How does that relate to cost and supply chain, total supply chain cost? How does it relate to service and top line growth? I need to be able to cascade my individual KPIs, whatever that may be, up, and
Yeah.
understand how to benchmark where you are individually. So I need the right KPIs as well. There's a few others, but one other one I want to touch on is technology, because you can't do it in Excel. IBF looks at a lot of organizations. We actually have a maturity model that we do for organizations built on research. So it's not just an opinion and shoehorning people into different categories. No, it's based on real results from companies having and what they're doing. So we look at a maturity from emerging, essential, next level, and vanguard. When you get to that next level and above, you're not operating in Excel anymore. Face it, you can't do today's business with the visibility we talked about, with the multi dimensions that we need to bring in. Nothing's deterministic anymore. We need to look at probabilities. When you look at all those aspects, you can't operate in Excel. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. It's interesting because as we do, Nulogy, as we do assessments, and we look at the customers where they're utilizing supplier collaboration within, it's like from their planning solution connected to their supplier's planning solution. What we find is that we're generally able to reduce the data lag by a couple of days between them, which doesn't seem like, you're like, oh, it's a couple of days, Christine. What, I mean, like, seriously, how much is that hurting my business? But when you start to look at how that cascades through the metrics, right?
Mhm.
It's millions and millions of dollars in savings because I can take 3 days out of multiple inventory buffers. It's not a single buffer, right? It's multiple inventory buffers. It's multiple, areas where you're transporting, maybe supply from one area to another. And so even just 2 or 3 days cut out of that data lag can have a really significant impact on the business.
Absolutely, and that's what a
Yeah.
lot of people, they don't understand. They focus. I mean, always demand's fault, and
No,
demand's always
absolutely.
wrong, you know. But the truth is, when it comes to demand or supply, when it comes to managing uncertainty, for every 1% of uncertainty, it equals about 0.6% of inventory reduction versus lead time
Okay,
and
so
being
say
able
that
to
again.
latency in the signal
Say that again. 1% reduction in uncertainty
is about
yields
0.6% reduction.
0.6% reduction in inventory. I hope my team is dialed in because we need to add that into our assessments when we're
But
looking at.
lead time is where you get the bang for your buck, or latency of signal. To be able
Right.
to reduce that latency, people don't realize how much impact that has in the inventory, that has in
Yeah.
decisions that are being made. Those are almost point 0.8, point 0.9 for everyone. So, I mean, you get exponentially more benefit from reduction of your signal latency, and getting, reducing
Right.
latency of signal, or reducing lead times, than you will with managing uncertainty. Now, obviously, you need to try to reduce uncertainty, you need to try to
Right. Right.
reduce those,
Yeah.
but you're going to get more out of getting the signal quicker.
Right. Well, and by the way, the third leg of that stool is so I can reduce the uncertainty, I can reduce the latency, but then the third leg is if I'm interconnected directly, system to system, I have interoperability, I reduce errors. So I don't have just as much junk coming into my advanced planning system or my ERP. And so I'm making decisions faster with less uncertainty and they're prone to less errors.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Exactly. I mean, it's nirvana. And I do feel like we're finally starting to see some trends in this area. What about you? Like, what are you seeing, companies finally kind of clicking, they're kind of making this connection, or are people really like what's happening with market leaders in this area?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing, when I look at the Vanguard S&OP processes, one of the things we see is taking latency out of the signal, real time type of visibility. They're focusing more on the visibility. They're focusing on the latency. That's where they're going now. They've mastered a planning process, and now they're really working on the management side of the process and adding that visibility, adding in, taking out that latency. So I'm seeing that. The other big, you know keyword I said was agility, but a brother to that, or akin to that, is consensus, or a one number type of attitude. And we find a very high correlation between consensus and agility. And we saw that as companies, even if they're going in the wrong direction, as they feed in new information, they now can adjust together towards a new bearing or a new direction. That is agility. And then if you take latency out, add in new visibility from external sources, I now can bring in new information. But the key is to have everyone operating off the same direction, same North Star. As we bring in new information, as we reduce the cycle time to get that information, now we together we can pivot to
Right.
new directions. That is where I'm seeing, Lori, the companies that are excelling at planning, excelling in S&OP and S&OE and master planning. That's where I'm seeing them focus now. Consensus, visibility, access to new points of information. That's what I'm seeing now.
Okay. So are there specific kinds of tools or business processes that you're seeing them apply that maybe some of their peers are not applying?
From a business process, that becomes the structured S&OP, structured S&OE type of meetings that we see. The more structure they're putting to it, they're finding the efficiencies that the process is being able to enable. So with that, they have more of a structured S&OP, IBP type of process with the right cadence, the right elements. They're defining their planning horizon for that. They have a structured S&OE type of cadence as well, defining the roles, responsibilities, the cadence for that, certain elements of that. So they're creating that really structure to the process. Now, when you're looking at the technology elements of that, people are looking. One of the things we found from a technology is it's no longer the one size fits all, the behemoth type of ERP system that does everything for everyone. And they found out, guess what? It doesn't. It does, master. I mean, as far as a single source of truth, yeah, it does that. But a lot of the planning capabilities, it's not so much.
No,
So
no. And look, I'm a huge advocate of best of breed and
I
purpose
am,
built.
I
I
am
mean,
too.
you got to buy, like, you know what? I don't need a sledgehammer to put up a picture on the wall, right? Like,
Exactly.
that is perhaps not going to be the right tool for the job. And which is also why one of the things that I'm hopeful groups like IBF or ASCM or CSCMP will help companies understand that collaboration, meaningful, dynamic, high fidelity collaboration, and more importantly, interoperability requires meaningful integration between companies. That
Absolutely.
means it's not a portal. It's not, you don't ask your suppliers to log in and rekey information, which is still going to be latent and prone to errors. It's not a spreadsheet upload. It's not a spreadsheet email. Even if that email is once a day, that's not real time. It's prone to errors. It's latent, right? Like all of those things. You really have to look for solutions that are purpose built that allow you to have this meaningful connection. I call it virtual vertical integration. I think that's the reason we fell off the cliff in the last 4 or 5 years for supply chain is we're no longer vertically integrated. We haven't been, and quite frankly, we didn't know how close to the press up we were.
We can't think linear. We have to think. We look at it as an ecosystem. I mentioned that technology. People are looking at an ecosystem for their
Yeah.
technology, but an also ecosystem for the process. And you have an advocate out here because IBF. What I've been, I do dozens of in-house trainings for corporations, and my message is collaboration, consensus, and transparency. And that transparency is being honest but also visible with what you're doing and what you have.
Yeah.
And that's not only internal. I preach that we have to get outside our own four walls. We have to start working. We have to have an outside in mentality and get away from this inside out thought
Oh my God.
process and linear
This is what I
thinking
can do
that
for
we've had.
you. No, tell me what it like I want to tell you what I need.
Right.
Oh, I love it.
Or
So
build
I
it and hope
told
someone
you,
comes. No, it's an outside in. What's the
yeah,
market? What's the customer?
yeah.
What's the supplier? What's going to be the value overall, not just for me?
Right. So I told you that this half hour would go super, super quick.
Yes.
I knew that it would. So tell us, where is IBF going to be in the new year? Where are you going to be? How can people find you?
IBF, we have lots of different conferences, boot camps, town halls. Go to IBF.org. There's a lot of, I said, we're a practitioner professional organization. So there's a lot of free material, a lot of free events that we do as well. So IBF.org, you can see the whole calendar is coming up in 2025. We'll be all over the globe doing these boot camps and conferences, and we do in-house trainings. Anybody wants that as well. There's a vast body of knowledge. Me, myself, I'm actually working on my next book. I got bored. I had to start writing a next book. So I'm going to start working on cultural complexities in global S&OP process, how different cultures approach
I love
decisions
it.
and collaboration communication and consensus and transparency, the things we're talking about, how different cultures approach that. So I've just started that. So if anybody wants to participate in research or reach out to me, as far as some antidotes on that, I'm collecting them now for the next book.
I love it. I love it. So, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get a hold of both Eric and myself. But the Nulogy team, we have several events coming up at the first of the year. So hopefully you will join us. But we definitely want to hear from you. Like, reach out. What are your questions? What are your comments? What are your feedback? Before we sign off today, I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to our show producer, Let's Talk Supply Chain. Encourage you to take a look at the wonderful work that they're doing to build up supply chain communities. If you are struggling to find a community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts, look no further than Sarah and her team at Let's Talk Supply Chain. I myself am part of the Secret Society of Supply Chain. I think it's a wonderful community. They have multiple kind of themes and areas. So do yourself a favor, go to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com to explore which community is made for you. I also need to thank our show sponsor and my employer, Nulogy, an innovator in supply chain technology focused on decreasing the friction between suppliers and customers to everyone's benefit through collaboration and synchronization. On that note, we must say goodbye, but I'm hopeful you'll tune in next month when my guest is the legendary John Wayne of supply chain himself, Mr. Jake Barr. So he's going to give us a rundown on what we should expect in 2025 and advice on how best to prepare in order to ensure success. Because I need you, supply chain gurus, to remember, companies don't win, supply chains do. So until next time, happy holidays, and we will see you in 2025.